What's going on, YouTube fam, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be talking about the two biggest cities in Mexico, Mexico City and Guadalajara, specifically comparing them, giving you the pros and cons of living in each city. Now, let me say this disclaimer. This is not to have favoritism or to say it's bad, don't go there, or choose this one over that one. It's nothing like that. I thought it would be a fun video to kind of show you the two biggest cities in Mexico, the similarities between them, the comparisons, and the pros, the good things, and the not so good things that naturally come with being in a big city. All right. So we're going to go through the pros and cons of both Mexico City and Guadalajara, show you a little bit. And this is mostly from my perspective. I mean, I imagine some of you out there who either live in Guadalajara or live in Mexico City or have experience being in both places can probably identify, or if you're from either place, you probably can understand where I'm coming from. And even if you have never been, this will kind of give you an idea of what it's like lifestyle wise. Now, there's so many pros and cons I can run through, but these are the basic ones that I think when you think about these two cities or big cities and these magnitudes, you think about these few things. So coming from my perspective, I hope you guys enjoy the video. So without further ado, let's get into the first. Actually, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with cons, all right? And then we're going to end it with the pros, end it on a nice, smooth, and positive note, all right? So first, we're going to get started with the cons. Let's go. Okay, first up, we have the capital of Mexico, Mexico City, also known as Ciudad de Mexico, all right? One of the biggest cities in the world, or the biggest city in North America, and of course, the biggest city in Mexico. So let's talk about a few cons living in Mexico City. All right, so in Mexico City, as we all know, living in a huge city like this, the traffic is absolutely atrocious, which is to be expected if you're living in a city with 9 million in the city limits and over 20 million in the metropolitan area. You're going to have some congestion, all right? So that's to be expected. I mean, I lived in São Paulo, Brazil for 3 years, which is bigger than Mexico City in size and population. Same situation. There was pollution issues. There was traffic issues. It is what it is, you know? So it comes along with it. So if you live in Mexico City, you want to live there and you plan on driving, just know the traffic, you're going to have to be very strategic and drive outside peak hours because traffic is nuts. All right. So that's the first con of living in Mexico City. The second con of living in Mexico City is pollution. Now, of course, that goes hand in hand with the traffic situation. When you live in a big city and you have a lot of motor vehicles commuting back and forth and all kinds of different factories and things of that nature, there's going to be pollution. And even times in Mexico City where you see some pictures, or even if you're there and you can notice it if you're from a higher building, you can see the smog glazing over the city, you know, and it's just a part of the game. I mean, big cities like Beijing and China, I'm thinking like India, like Delhi, huge cities with a lot of people like that. There's going to be some pollution. You got so many people, you got so many cars moving, so many things going on. So that's to be expected in Mexico City, pollution. It sucks, but it is what it is, all right? The next con is public transportation. Now, this is not saying public transportation is bad. It is good. It is great in Mexico City. It's very extensive, okay? But when you're traveling on peak hours, it is a nightmare. You got you're like sardines in a tin. You know what I mean? People pushing, shoving, trying to get on the train to go where they have to go. And like I said, I experienced this in living in New York City and living in São Paulo, Brazil. You know, it's like that. So the amount of people in peak hours on public transit is a nightmare. But I'm telling you, in Mexico City, and I've been on the train many times in Mexico City, when you're outside of peak hours, it's a pleasant experience. It's 5 pesos to ride. 5 pesos, that's nothing. You know, it's like 60 cents, 70 cents US, you know, and it's very efficient. There's many different lines, and you can easily get around the city. So that's another con when it comes to Mexico City, okay? Now, other con of Mexico City, and I'm sure none of you will be surprised when I say this, is it is prone to earthquakes, okay? Mexico City is known for having some severe earthquakes, and it sucks because I love Mexico City. I do. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, but that's one reason I couldn't live there because, you know, everything's all cool. You're chilling and then you hear that wow, 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 the alerta sísmica, which is the earthquake alarm, and then it's on. Then you're just panic and you're like, oh, well, what do I do? So it's good that system exists, but that is a thing. Now, earthquakes don't happen every single day, and, you know, they've been a long time without getting any earthquakes, but that is an issue. So if earthquakes are not your thing, you know, if that doesn't bother you, okay. If it does, just be aware that the way Mexico City was built on a lake bed, it was built basically over water. So the ground underneath is not so sustainable. That's why you feel the earthquake so much. And plus it's at elevation. So those are the cons of Mexico City. I'm sure I could have thought of more, but I'm just going to throw those out there. Next, let's get into the cons of Guadalajara. Okay, so it's time to talk about the cons of Guadalajara. Now, for those of you who follow my channel, already know that I live in Guadalajara. I love this city. It's an amazing city to live. Has everything you need. But there are a few cons here too. Nothing's perfect, okay? So let's get into that, all right? One of the cons in Guadalajara is the public transportation. Now, it's decent, it's not terrible, but it's not as extensive as Mexico City. For example, the train lines, there's only 3 of them. One goes north to south and the other goes east to west. And then there's another one that also does north to south as well. The 4th is in construction and should be open by next year, according to their projections. So that leaves you, if you're not going to a place where the train travels to, that leaves you having to depend on buses. Now, buses can be very efficient. They're extensive, but can also be crowded, and you got to take in time. If you got to go somewhere during rush hour, same deal. You're going to be hitting traffic on the road because Guadalajara does get some pretty bad traffic. Not as bad as Mexico City, but it can get pretty deep. It's a city with over 5 million people in the metropolitan area, so it's to be expected, okay? Now, the next one is the dry weather. Now, it's not always like this. Right now, as a matter of fact, it's rainy season. But at the beginning of the year, from like January to March, this year it extended a little bit more to May, the weather was very dry. And if you're not used to it, your nose is going to have to adjust. You may need to use like a saline solution to keep your nose lubricated, but it can be a pain because it just messes with you. I mean, it messed with me. I mean, I've been living here for a year and a half. I had the problems when I came here in March of last year, and even this year it got to me. So that was another situation, but not so bad. I mean, you get used to it, and like I said, you can get the natural spray, and that'll help alleviate those symptoms, okay? All right, next is the distance of the airport. Now, from about the center of the city, depending on where you are, with no traffic, that is, you can get to the airport in about 20 or 25 minutes. When there's absolutely no traffic, highways are clear. The con of that is when there is traffic, or you may not perceive there to be traffic at a certain time, and then everything is smooth until you hit like the middle of the way, and then it's just atrocious traffic because it's a very industrial zone surrounding Guadalajara. And the airport is southeast of the city, which is very industrial. There's a lot of traffic moving back and forth. So then I would say that you would have to, if you got a flight, especially if it's an international flight, you want to make sure you're there at least 3 hours. I mean, give yourself some time, 3 hours before your flight, because I had a friend of mine, it happened to him. He thought like, hey, it was all good, and I can understand that. You didn't really expect it. And the next thing you know, he missed his flight and he had to buy another one. Luckily, he was able to get one for the same day a few hours later, but that was a pain, all right? So outside of that, just be aware of that con. Like, it's not exactly next to the city. Like some airports are like in the city center or like really close or right on the outside. But this one is a little bit of a distance. It's a lot farther than it looks, but just keep that in mind if you're moving here, okay? There we go. So the next con of living in Guadalajara, I would have to say, now this is a cross. I was thinking and I was like, which one is it gonna be? I would say some of the roads. Now, this can be around Mexico. Some of the roads are kind of crazy. I've even twisted my ankle a couple of times walking. But I've seen this when I used to live in Merida. I've seen this in other parts of Mexico. Guadalajara is a very old city. So some places in Guadalajara, you're going to be walking in the street. There's all kinds of cracks in the streets. It looks like their sidewalk has been dug. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't really seem to get repaired too quickly, depending on what neighborhood you're in. So a lot of the times I always have to look down at the ground to make sure I'm not like stepping in a little hole or something. But on the flip side, there's sidewalks everywhere, which is a good thing. But yeah, some of the qualities of the streets are just not where it's at. So be mindful when walking around certain parts of Guadalajara, because there's going to be cracks and missing stones and all the stuff like that, okay? All right, so now that we got those cons out the way, we're going to start with some pros, and then we're going to start with Mexico City. All right, let's get into the good stuff, the pros. So let's start again with Mexico City. Now, the pros of Mexico City are, it's a big city, so it has so many things to do. There's so many things to do. Museums, restaurants, bars, parks, cultural activities, events, concerts, music, anything and everything you can imagine is there. You want coffee shops, you want street food, you want just whatever you're looking for, you can find it in Mexico City. So it is very diverse in terms of what it offers. There's so many things to do, and I don't think you'd ever get bored there, honestly, okay? So that's the first one. Another one is public transportation. Now, I know I mentioned public transportation in the cons, but if you look at it on a whole, the public transportation in Mexico City is very efficient, it's very good, and it works well. I've used it many times, and it's cool because it takes you straight to and from Mexico City International Airport. So if you don't feel like messing with an Uber or a taxi, 5 pesos, you go straight to the terminal, do a little walk-in, you're good to go. You're at the airport. So public transportation in Mexico City is very fantastic, okay? Also, Mexico City is a very walkable city, especially when you're in the downtown areas, places surrounding there. I've been around many parts of Mexico City, and I found it to be very easy to walk around. Sidewalks everywhere, even the kind that are like in the middle, like when you have a road on two sides, and like middle, and they have trees and benches you could sit. So it's very easy to walk around, very easy to get around. And, you know, it comes to being a big city, well, at least that type of big city like Mexico City. Another good part of Mexico City is its geographic location and access to international destinations. Now, Mexico City, the airport, people is not the best, but Mexico City is connected to Europe. It's connected to many cities in South America, North America, United States, Canada, and even has flights to Japan, to Tokyo, yes. Maybe even more to Asia, I don't know, but I saw that they have a direct flight from Mexico City to Tokyo, so that's pretty cool. So if you're planning on staying in Mexico City for an extended period of time or living there, you're gonna be well connected to the world in terms of flights. That is a fantastic thing. You can pretty much get anywhere from Mexico City. And the airport is right in the middle of the city, and it's easy to get to. It's not on the outskirts. It's very practical in this regard. Another pro of Mexico City is there's a lot of nature, parks like Bosque de los Colomos, that's Guadalajara, oh my God. Bosque Chapultepec, okay, which has that classic castle. You have Parque Alameda, which is in the center, city center. I mean, they preserve these parks. They stay very beautiful. Parque Mexico, between Condesa and Roma. There's so many. Parque España. So if you like nature within the city, if say you have dogs, you just like taking walks in the park, you're going to find nice places with trees, all kinds of nice flowers, the whole nine. It's going to be nice, okay? And another pro I'll throw in there also is the options of food. Food options in Mexico City are absolutely ridiculous. You can find anything you're looking for, whether it's traditional Mexican food, seafood, you know, fast food restaurants, whatever. You're going to find food. You will not go hungry. You will not be in a lack of options with Mexico City. Trust me, all right? They have all types of food you can imagine, you know, and I'll include coffee shops in there as well. Just everything, and some good ones, some really good ones too. So definitely, all right? Now, let's get into the pros of Guadalajara. For me, the pros of Guadalajara, one of them, the food here is absolutely fantastic. In Jalisco State in general, it's known for having some of the best food, maybe the best in Mexico, and the food here is really good. Is where barbacoa comes from, birria. You know, there's so many that can name carne en su jugo. There's a lot of different foods that originate from Jalisco, and Guadalajara just has amazing options of food, very tasty, and there's so many restaurants here that you could try. It's absolutely crazy, okay? So just know if you come to Guadalajara, you're gonna have a lot of options of food. Another thing for Guadalajara is nightlife. Nightlife is absolutely crazy. There's a whole strip called Avenida Chapultepec where there's bars, restaurants, clubs, cafes, stores, whatever. And even in the vicinity, there's other places. You can't go bored. And there's other places around the city, but that is like the main avenue, okay? So you're not gonna get bored in Guadalajara. You're just not. The geographic location is another pro because the airport is a fairly decent airport as well, even though it's a little on the outside. But you also have other states of Mexico nearby. Nayarit to the north, Guanajuato to the east, and then you have to the south, Colima, Michoacan. And there's so many nice things to do and see around here within a few hours drive or bus ride. So in this part of Mexico, in this region, is a really good region to be in, and you're pretty well connected, and there's so many nice things to see nearby, even within the state of Jalisco, definitely. Okay, and another pro is the people. People in Guadalajara are extremely friendly, very welcoming people, and it's a little bit different than the big city, what you may be used to, but people here are just really friendly, really welcoming, really cool, really inquisitive, very curious folks. They'll ask you about where you're from, carrying little conversations, but it's very pleasant dealing with the tapatíos and tapatías, inclusive, okay? So definitely. And the last one, I'll just throw this bonus in there, low risk of earthquakes. Now, we're on the west coast of Mexico, which is on the Ring of Fire, but Jalisco rarely, and I mean rarely, suffers any earthquakes. It's super rare. The last time, or the only time I've ever felt one, was the one that happened in Colima, Michoacan in September 19th of last year, which is the curse day for Mexico because they're always getting bad earthquakes on the 19th of September. We felt it here. It wasn't terrifying, it wasn't terrible. I felt it significantly, but it was nothing to be scared about, and everybody was surprised because they happen so rarely here. So if earthquakes are a risk for you, yes, it can happen, but it's so rare and almost unheard of. It's just not a thing. I mean, people don't even think about it, okay? So I know there's so much more that I could put in there, but those are the few things of each city that I wanted to throw in, and I hope you all got an insight from this video. And if you're thinking about going to either, go to both Mexico City and Guadalajara. They're both cities. I love both of them. And if you live in Guadalajara, you live in Mexico City, or if you lived in both, or if you're from there, or if you visited there, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if there's anything that I left out or any pros and cons that you may find to be, in your own opinion. And that's all, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope everybody has a great day. Today's 4th of July, so happy 4th to all my Americans celebrating around the world. Thank you all to my subscribers. Thank you, everybody, for hitting like. Hit that thumbs up. As you know, more videos coming soon. Until then, you all stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next video.